What happens when the hero who always makes everyone laugh can no longer hide his pain behind that smile? When speaking seriously becomes a luxury you can't afford, since no one listens past your jokes. This is the story of Plastic Man, who you likely know as the funny, entertaining guy, thanks to movies, animated series, or comic anecdotes. Well, in this video we'll talk about how, over the years, Patrick O'Brien became a prisoner of his own jokes, and when he came to ask his teammates for help when he most needed to be taken seriously, almost everyone decided to ignore him. Being the person who always makes everyone else laugh couldn't save him from feeling invisible. Welcome to a new NEGAYO channel video. This time we're talking about Plastic Man No More, a story that tells the tragedy of being considered comic relief. Because when death is knocking at your door, who's going to be able to take you seriously? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do, please subscribe and turn on notifications to catch new content. It all started like any other day. The Justice League was facing a villain named Solaris. This enemy was protected. He was about to vaporize some orphaned children with his death ray, but fortunately they were saved at the last moment by Plastic Man. In this way, the rest of the heroes managed to neutralize the threat and achieve victory, as they have done every day for almost a couple of decades now. Only this time, something strange happens with Plastic Man. He feels weak, in pain, he even has trouble standing up. Superman congratulates the team for the excellent work, completely ignoring that burn on his teammate's chest, maybe thinking that he could regenerate at any moment. Some heroes mention the smell of burnt plastic coming from Plastic Man. This would have been a good moment for Patrick to take the matter with a good dose of seriousness, but instead he ends up making a joke about that deadly ray, whose impact still burns on his body, saying that Solaris has left him still half-cooked. This makes Batman and Green Lantern laugh, as they're already used to these jokes at the end of each mission. Despite this, Patrick doesn't get the League's attention to tell them that he actually feels hurt by the attack. Instead, he makes another joke about it. Wow, I wish I had used a stronger sunscreen, and the laughter gets even louder. Wonder Woman even points out her partner's extraordinary sense of humor, having no idea that Plastic Man is about to fall into a deep abyss. It wasn't until this moment that Patrick O'Brien realized the League wasn't able to hear anything else from him except jokes. Maybe so much time fighting together had gotten them used to this. Because the moment he mentioned with a shy smile that he really was feeling sore, it was as if he were invisible. The other heroes only focused on spending time with the little fans, completely leaving Patrick aside. If you're unfamiliar, Patrick O'Brien was a former criminal from Pocahontas who was permanently changed after an accident. He joined the Justice League to atone for his past, and years have gone by since. In this world, it seems like everyone lives in a status quo, so when a deadly danger is right in front of the superheroes, no one is able to notice it. I'll tell you right now, this story doesn't end well for our protagonist. I think there are two interesting perspectives to consider in this story. Well, it's not just about Plastic Man asking for help, but also about putting ourselves in the shoes of these heroes. And considering Patrick's personality, would we have done anything for him? Becoming a superhero doesn't actually mean that Patrick's life is even remotely stable. He's neither respected like others nor enjoys a comfortable life outside fighting crime. There's no family waiting for him at home, and he doesn't even have a civilian life to speak of. When Patrick arrives at his apartment, we see he's broken and alone. Also, as viewers, we can notice that the environment around this character changes drastically to a dark atmosphere when he's not in the company of his colorful and perfect companions. This is a contrast that's important to point out, and we'll keep seeing it as we go further. Patrick finds no messages on the answering machine, and all the mail concerns unpaid debts. Wow, there's nothing edible in the fridge. Still very weak, Patrick must lie down, hoping to feel better by morning. Sadly, part of his right arm melts overnight. When he wakes up, Plastic Man finds his hand somehow climbed up the tub and down the drain. Patrick was surprised by the event. Nervously, he waits for a few moments, thinking that a new hand would appear. But this never happened. Since work was calling, he had to wrap a plastic bag around his melting arm to contain it. At the League meeting, Plastic Man explains his hand's disappearance, and instead of causing concern, laughter quickly followed. drowning out Patrick's call for help. Only Detective Chimp questioned what was happening at that moment. Although he was a valuable member of the team and probably the best investigator in the world, he wasn't taken too seriously either because of his appearance. As we mentioned earlier, when this hero isn't joking, it's as if he's invisible to the other superheroes. Even his lines fade into the background, hidden beneath the words of the other characters. While they discuss the Solaris case and plan to ask how he obtained the technology, Patrick requested they examine him before he turned into the Wicked Witch of the West. That is, before he died from whatever was happening to him. And once again, the laughter didn't take long to erupt. At this point, it's clear that this Justice League might not be as perceptive as other versions we know. Where is Superman's leadership, Green Arrow's humanity, Wonder Woman's empathy, or Batman's common sense? It's as if none of these qualities exist in them. But it's also worth noting that Plastic Man has this habit of joking in an almost compulsive way. He's been doing it for years. And everyone is so used to his only contribution to these meetings being just a couple of jokes, he caused that himself. Now, every time he tries to speak seriously, unconsciously, all his words get twisted until they just become bad jokes. Once Plastic Man leaves, he's approached by Bobo, who offers some words of support to his companion. Noticing the seriousness, Patrick appeared apathetic, tired of always being the butt of jokes. Something this detective fully understood. Even so, Bobo had managed to talk to Batman to make him understand that Patrick's problem was serious. But instead of recommending a doctor, the Bat suggested consulting a petroleum chemist from Wayne Industries. This was the only good thing that happened to Patrick during this day. He left grateful to his companion. Thank you for listening. I suppose those of us in the cheap seats need to look out for one another. When he went to see Dr. Vera, the news was devastating. In short, Plastic Man was disintegrating at the molecular level, and there was no treatment that could help him. It's likely that this could happen to him in the future anyway, but we're talking about many years from now. However, that Solaris death ray seems to have accelerated the whole process. Upon hearing this, Patrick let out a dry, nervous laugh, trying to calm his fear of dying. Then he asked the doctor to stop joking, but she was being very serious. Okay, I'm dying. How funny. Whenever the plastic bag on his arm filled, Patrick emptied it into buckets. He wasn't sure it made sense, but refused to throw it away as if discarding himself. It wasn't until this experience with death announced that our protagonist began to reflect on his life, not just his criminal past, but also how. It seemed that his path would become successful once he was accepted by the Justice League. Years ago, he had someone by his side who believed in him and celebrated his triumphs. In contrast to his embarrassing moments with the superheroes, where he was called the funny guy, the fool, and the freak. As I mentioned before, the life of a hero is not necessarily surrounded by stability and glory. There are many examples that could be cited. In Patrick's case, being part of the Justice League doesn't necessarily mean he has become a better person. His failures as a human being, his avoidance of responsibilities, led him to focus much more than he should have on his work as a hero, putting his wife on the back burner, and also his little son Luke. And when he wasn't working, he was too tired. Or at least that's what he said. Eventually, this marriage ended. Patrick recalled these moments, calling himself a loser, idiot, coward, and failure. Only then did he realize his son would eventually share his fate. Because he had inherited his powers, Patrick managed to convince him to meet at a restaurant. Our protagonist was glad to see Luke. He even repeated it more than once, but unfortunately, the boy didn't share the same feeling. He asked how he was doing, and his son replied curtly that it had been 6 years since they last spoke. Plastic Man used his Justice League work as an excuse. When asked about his Titans days, there was no answer. He asked about Luke's mother, but the boy wouldn't answer, so he got straight to the point. He confessed that he was dying. He discussed everything Dr. Vera mentioned and apologized for being a terrible father. But beyond that, the topic of death was something they both needed to talk about. Luke, being perceptive, asked if this decomposition could happen to him too, and that was the question why Patrick wanted to see his son. He asked him to visit Dr. Vera for a checkup, but Luke flatly refused. He left the place demanding that this situation should not be mentioned to his mother. At night, Dr. Vera was having a glass of wine while enjoying some old videos of her little daughter. She was interrupted by Patrick knocking on the window, shouting that he needed a favor. He apologized, asking if he woke anyone, but Dr. Vera, sounding a bit sad, said he hadn't. There was no one else here. Immediately, Patrick asked if, theoretically, there could be any way to reverse the depolymerization he was experiencing, and the doctor replied that the only possibility of permanently joining the strategy would be with a radical fusion reaction of enormous magnitude. Basically, the largest nuclear bomb ever made by man was needed. After thinking about what could happen to Luke, Patrick stopped worrying about himself and was determined to find a way to save his son's life. But the real question is, does Plastic Man do this to save Luke? Or is it just a final attempt, desperate to make up for his mistakes with an act he considers heroic? The doctor warned this solution was only a theory to reverse molecular decomposition. He or the subjects would have to be at the epicenter of the explosion, so being destroyed by the detonation of the device was a much more likely reality. Upon hearing these words, Patrick just wanted to understand that a nuclear bomb was needed, and he thought it was an excellent idea. Patrick's next step was to collect materials for the nuclear bomb, so he reached out to his old criminal partner, Woozy. He didn't really understand why Plastic Man wanted to return to the underworld, so Patrick explained that this wasn't about him, it was about saving Luke. A few weeks ago, Dr. No-Face kidnapped Uranium, one of the metal men, while also planning to create a powerful explosive. This was pretty convenient for Plastic Man, since they were basically making his job easier. The idea was to rescue the guy and use him for their own purposes. Woozy was a bit concerned about Uranio's fate, but Patrick assured him there was no problem. Since any of the metal men could be regenerated from any of their remains, Patrick thought about this for a moment, about how they couldn't die, but Luke could. After all your heroic acts and being among the world's greatest heroes, is there truly no one who can help you? Does the League think I'm a joke? They always have. I have no other choice. Plastic Man presented his strategy to the Justice League. He had called the rest of the metal men to join the mission. The group was committed to the plan. But while Patrick spoke again, his words were drowned out by the conversation between Batman and Superman, who were discussing how dangerous the theft of uranium was, and then started talking about the correct pronunciation of Dr. No-Face's name. At that moment, Patrick couldn't hold back any longer and ended up sneezing on the table, leaving a disgusting stain of all his dead matter in the metal superheroes who for a moment were shocked by what they saw, at least until Plastic Man broke the silence, asking if they liked his interpretation of Jackson Pollock. Only then did the League approve his mission and wait for rescue updates. Patrick and the metal men agreed to meet the next morning, although the latter had also noticed some deterioration in Plastic Man, who could barely stand. He insisted that everything was fine, and Bobo, stepping out of the shadows, asked if he was sure about that, since Patrick seemed to be in a degrading state. The night is darkest before the dawn, isn't it? Detective Chimp wanted details about Patrick's doctor visit, Vera, and he assured her that he was already undergoing treatment to recover. Bobo also offered to help with Uranium's rescue, just in case, but Patrick insisted that everything was under control. All right, just let me know, Patrick. I'll be around. Despite the clear distance that existed in their relationship, Luke couldn't help but feel worried about his father. He even called his mother to say O'Brien was in trouble. But in this woman's words, there was nothing but anger and resentment. How many times were we in trouble? Where was he? Nowhere. To me, he's dead. Luke replied that that was exactly the point. Patrick was dying, which surprised the woman. A deep silence became noticeable for a few moments, but she decided to continue with her work and hang up the phone. Now that the plan to rescue Uranio was ready, Plastic Man needed Dr. Vera's help to assemble the explosive. It was a task she flatly refused, as she never considered, not even for a moment, the possibility that Patrick would put this theory into practice. As noted earlier, being vaporized at the detonation's epicenter was far more likely than halting molecular decomposition. The other result would be a dead plastic man, solidified as a useless mass. To this, Patrick replied that he was already a useless mass. Vera apologized to the hero and also asked him to leave her home. Plastic Man. He was desperate and said that this wasn't to save himself, but to save his son, to spare him this horrible fate of slowly melting to death. I know you don't have children, so maybe you don't understand how I feel, but so what? Dr. Vera started to cry, leaving Patrick a little confused. It turns out this woman had a daughter. Afterwards, there was an accident where the little girl was seriously injured, very seriously, despite the attempts to save her life. Vera's husband eventually suggested it might be time to stop fighting. That maybe the best thing was to let go and give the little girl peace. Vera agreed and they both gave up, but there wasn't a single day when she didn't ask herself, what else could Plastic Man have done? Knowing that Doctora now doubted the refusal she had given before, he simply assured her that he would have the uranium ready for the next day. They would carry out the experiment in a completely unpopulated area so no one would get hurt. It was a promise. Amid confusion over his father's impending death, Luke had recently distanced himself from the Titans. Robin was worried about his teammate. He reached out to help and the boy replied he just had father issues. Well, we could say that Dick Grayson understood him perfectly, since the tension and current distance with Batman had given him some experience on the subject. Meanwhile, Dr. No-Face played poker with uranium at a weapons refinery. I'm not really sure why this guy just didn't put up a fight and left this place. More importantly, I'd like to highlight the villain's motives for kidnapping this Metalmen member. First, No-Face claims to hate faces, saying they only show falseness and must be destroyed because they don't reveal a person's true nature. The truth is found beneath the mask. In response to this, Uranio simply replied that this argument was just garbage, something that really offended the villain.
I'll tell you what's truly garbage. Mount Rushmore. It displays the faces of imperialists and conquerors. It's garbage, and I will destroy it. Using uranium, I will impose my truth on the world.
It should be mentioned that Uranium isn't exactly the friendliest of the Metal Men. He's known to be conceited, unpleasant, and not exactly friendly. That said, the guy is definitely not dumb, and his words, just like those of the others, have an important meaning in this story.
You're just jealous. Your approach is, if I don't have a face, no one else will either.
Maybe you feel like you're missing a real identity, which feeds a deeper neurosis and makes you question your own existence. So you use violence and terror to prove to the rest of the world that you're real, which is sad and pathetic.
Clearly offended after being read perfectly by Uranio, No-Face stood up from the table, ending the game. At that moment, the Metal Men and Plastic Man burst into the refinery, surprising everyone. Patrick's simple secret plan was for Woosie to help him escape with uranium in a van after the henchmen and No-Face were defeated. More monsters, more lies. Look at this. Metal and plastic combined. Just add glass and cardboard for full recyclability. I got it, move! Once the mission was over, Uranio didn't thank us for the rescue. In fact, the only thing he said was that he had hated all his brothers for as long as he could remember. Now then, Patrick's next step was to immobilize the Metal Men with a giant magnet. But unfortunately, this didn't work, because except for iron, none of the other members were metallic, something pretty basic that Patrick overlooked. The group instantly questioned Plastic Man's true intentions. He barely replied that he needed uranium for a small job. Desperate, he shouted at Woosie to come up with a new plan, but there was really nothing else to do. And that's when the tragedy happened. The magnetic waves significantly weakened the structure the Metal Men were standing on, enough for the supports to give way under the weight and drop everyone into the molten steel. Plastic Man barely held onto the bridge and supported uranium, but the other Metal Men weren't as fortunate. As they melted in the intense heat, their screams of pain and desperation could be heard throughout the refinery. Little by little, these cries faded away until the place was silent. Even Uranio was surprised by the turn the situation took. And Woosie was clearly upset and scared by the accident. He was still holding on to the hope that they could be regenerated. He wanted to believe that there was still something of them left down there. That's what his friend had promised him. No one would get hurt. No one would have to die. Tonight, that oath was broken, and Patrick O'Brien crossed a line he never imagined. However, this wouldn't stop him from going through with his plans. The next day, Plastic Man presented his report to the Justice League. He said the threat from Dr. No-Face was neutralized and there was no longer a risk of an explosion at Mount Rushmore. Patrick's dialogues were ignored again, while Batman and Superman focused on deciding dinner. Still, our protagonist keeps narrating the mission's events, until, of course, the awkward part arrives, notifying that except for uranium, all the metal men were dead. Bobo was shocked by the news, but Patrick stayed focused, insisting the mission was successful despite casualties. Batman, Flash, Aquaman, they were all dismayed, and Plastic Man was stubborn. Did he really believe he had done a good job even after losing his team? So what, Patrick? You take the credit for the mission's success but wash your hands of your team's death. These words from Chimp finally ended Plastic Man's patience. Okay, that's enough. You guys are really getting on my nerves. I'm always the clown and I'm sick of it. Does anyone remember I'm dying, or did you just forget? I gave years to this group of idiots. What did I get back? Exactly, zero respect and a body that's just melting away. You know what? Can you shove this Justice League up your heroic asses? I quit. My parking spot was terrible anyway. Leaving now, it didn't really impact the other heroes much. No one stopped Plastic Man or spoke to him. They only cared about telling Dr. Magnus what happened. Bobo was the only one who went after Patrick, and all he got was an angry complaint from his former teammate. We always had each other's backs, right? Chimp, Woosie, and the doctor. Vera waited for Plastic Man at the apartment. Meanwhile, we just had to endure Uranio's hurtful comments. He himself mentions that he has never considered himself a moral person, but even so, he was shocked after the death of his entire family. He wondered if Woosie was smart enough to realize what his giant magnet had done, or if Dr. Vera was really so brilliant as to go ahead with this stupid plan. Patrick arrived and announced he had quit the Justice League, as he no longer felt like a hero. Not after last night's mess. Maybe...
It's for the best.
Uranio replied.
Accept it. Plastic Man, are you just a second-rate hero? You're in big trouble, but I think your whole life has always been a problem, hasn't it? I'd say your humor is just a cheap defense that masks deep insecurity. And I bet all your lousy jokes have come at the expense of any real human depth. Am I right? I don't want to be there when the jokes run out, Tal.
Like I told you, Uranio wasn't exactly friendly, maybe for the same reason that he was able to read people so easily. Dr. Vera asked for a moment alone with Patrick, but first she needed to open the windows, because Plastic Man's decomposition had reached such a point that he was starting to emit ethylene gas. She admitted that although Uranio was an idiot, he was right. Vera didn't know how to proceed with the plan due to her lack of knowledge. Still, rather than giving up, Patrick went to seek more help. By the way, Detective Chimp was not satisfied after Plastic Man's report to the Justice League. So, on his own, he went to the scene of the accident where he found some interesting clues. Most of what Patrick said about the accident was true, until Bobo found that giant abandoned magnet. He thought that maybe looking for fingerprints on this thing could reveal some answers. Patrick showed up at Titan's tower looking for Luke, although Robin was quite defensive, saying that his teammate didn't want to see him. Plastic Man said he was only here to help his son. But Dick didn't believe him for a moment. He even compared Patrick to Bruce Wayne, saying that both of them only ruin everything they touch, thinking they can fix it afterwards. Luke came out at that moment, telling Dick that everything was in order. He asked his father what he was looking for, but he just wanted to go for a walk. The boy again made it clear he didn't need help, and noticed his father was already quite deteriorated. Patrick didn't want to focus on that. He said tonight he only cared about doing one last superhero job. He told Luke that he recently carried out a mission where the villain, Dr. No-Face, had escaped, and he had just found out where he was hiding. He also mentioned that his powers weren't working properly anymore, and that's when Luke offered his help. So, what do you think? One last fight against crime with your old man? They both headed to the villain's hideout, and it's worth noting that for a moment, Luke forgot all the resentment for the mistakes his father had made in the past. He looked happy. When they both arrived at the place, it was supposed to be something simple. Before continuing, Patrick apologized to his son and told him he loved him, but Luke remained indifferent. At these words, Patrick said it again with some regret in his voice, as if something bad was about to happen. Lucy rammed into the boy to disorient him, while Dr. Vera injected him with a polymeric paralytic that would block his powers for hours. It had all been a part of a trap to force Luke to accept this help. The boy was furious at having been deceived, but Patrick remained calm, convinced that he was doing the right thing. The supposed villain, who was to be caught, was now working with Plastic Man. And for Luke, it was incredible to realize how low his father had sunk. The tension was palpable and Luke remained furious, clearly showing his distress. For example, Patrick O'Brien wanted his son to understand he was trying to spare him from this fate. This time, his words were supported by Dr. Vera, who assured that even though Luke had not yet shown symptoms of deterioration, it was quite likely that sooner or later this kind of illness would affect him. Due to the boy's stubbornness, Patrick made sure to explain that nothing he did was dangerous. The explosion could be contained and would occur in an unpopulated area of Mammoth City, a place that also triggered unpleasant childhood memories for Plastic Man from those godforsaken streets. He felt he was doing everyone a favor by destroying that old place, giving the city a chance to rebuild, all while saving his son. This was the only alternative to do something good after so many mistakes. The speech, in fact, was useful. Luke was convinced, and now all that was left was to head to the explosion site. This is where we finally learned Dr. No-Face's reasons for helping Plastic Man keep his face, something very simple, actually. When this experiment was over, Patrick would get his powers back, he would cut off his face to give it to his partner, and the deal would be done. During the conversation, Plastic Man noticed a strange silhouette in the distance. It was Detective Chimp. He had managed to track the whole group to this place, and he approached our protagonist, saying, "Hey, are you getting worse?" Although this time, Bobo wasn't referring to his physical appearance. The detective just wanted to hear the truth about the death of the Metal Men, thanks to the fingerprints on that giant magnet at this point. Did Bobo already know that Patrick's former criminal partner, Wussy Winks, was involved in all of this? He also knew that the accident at the refinery wasn't caused by poor conditions at the site. All signs indicated that secret about Plastic Man's true intentions. Bobo wanted him to confess, but his questioning was interrupted. When Dr. No-Face turned on his flamethrower to attack the detective, the ethylene gas that Plastic Man was emitting greatly increased the reach of the flames. The fire reached Detective Chimp, who after a short but intense moment of suffering, fell burned to the ground. Vera appeared to put out the flames. Patrick was shocked by what had just happened, realizing that Bobo, who was once the only one to reject him, could actually care about him. Now he was dead, all because he sought the truth. Why? Why not? Face justified himself by saying this was necessary if they didn't want the Justice League to find them out, and the Doctor backed this up with the argument that this was the only way to save Luke. Yes, Patrick was hurt, but he knew his companions were right. They had already gone too far to stop now. So they just took a tarp from the truck to wrap Bobo's body and throw it into the river. Before Luke realized what had happened, when they arrived at the experiment site, the place was, just as Plastic Man had described it to Luke, completely abandoned. No one was around for miles. Patrick already had bad memories of this place, and now he remembered walking here with his father a long time ago. He left me at a slot machine, got drunk, and lost $1,000 of the rent money playing blackjack. Luke stood with us, overhearing everything, and replied sarcastically, "My father also brought me here, tied me to this dock, and forced me into the center of a nuclear explosion." Patrick reminded him again that he was doing this to save him. The team was nearly ready to begin, and given Plastic Man's condition, it was best to start quickly. Suddenly, Patrick's head literally detached from his body, and Wussy rushed to the rescue with a container. For his friend, it was the only way to stay in one piece. As the moment of truth approached, questions started hitting Patrick. What if this didn't fix anything? and he decided to take a moment alone before moving on. Vera approached him, sharing more details about the daughter she lost. It was all her fault. That day, she was celebrating getting a scholarship with her research colleagues. She didn't remember exactly how much she drank that night, but it was enough to cause a car accident. Back then, after a long time fighting for their daughter's life, Vera's husband suggested disconnecting the girl's life support. Vera refused and went crazy, so the staff had to forcibly remove her from the hospital. She still remembered her little girl with love. She said that sometimes it was as if she could still hear her singing in her bedroom at night. She encouraged Patrick to keep going and not lose his son. "I think I've already lost him." Uranio's words are once again real and sharp, although I'm not sure if he started talking with the intention of looking for a way to escape through Luke, or if he just wants to make things as uncomfortable as possible.
He doesn't love you, Luke. Seriously.
He likely never has. At most, he sees you as his own reflection.
But if he manages to save you, then Patrick will prove to himself that he's a good father and miraculously make up for all the times he failed you in life.
Even Dr. No Face seemed uneasy with this harsh truth, so he pressed the button that instantly pulverized uranium. The time had come and Luke still refused to submit to the experiment. Patrick again tried to convince him with the same arguments, apologizing for his absence. So many years for not having been a role model. "You didn't have a father, but I want you to have a life. It's up to you, Luke. I'm not going to force you." These simple words affected the boy. But before giving an answer, Robin appeared at that moment to interrupt the plans. He was concerned about his partner, and though Plastic Man, annoyed, told him not to interfere, Dick already knew our protagonist's real intentions. The Metal Men's deaths and Detective Chimp's disappearance during his investigation were no coincidence. It felt like it was all over. Robin asked his partner to leave together, but after thinking about it for a few seconds, he now felt they should keep going. Maybe because deep down, for the first time in a long time, he was convinced that his father was completely honest. Luke regained his abilities and knocked Grayson into the water with one blow. "Sorry, Robin. My father's irresponsible, but I won't let him die." Dick didn't give up and started fighting Plastic Man, destroying a part of him with every blow. Finally, the container on his head broke and Patrick lost his shape. Robin thought he could still save his partner from going through with this madness, but instead he just ended up being slammed against the wall. Plastic Man was at his limit and they had to pour him into a bucket before he completely melted onto the floor. The team was ready and took their positions in the safe zone. In less than a couple of minutes, we would know if this whole journey has been worth it. Patrick just hoped to survive until the explosion. During this time, Luke recalled visiting here long ago with Patrick. Plastic Man. He'd nearly forgotten, despite it being a fun day for both. Not everything was bad in Patrick O'Brien's life. Maybe in these last days he dwelled on his failures, how no one took him seriously, and how he ruined his marriage and relationship with his son. But that wasn't his whole life. He had just lost some perspective. He also remembered a gift he was never able to give his wife, a watch. He was never able to buy it or steal it for her. I don't know if on the brink of death, Patrick was having his clearest moment, or maybe that's when he realized that losing Luke was something much more painful than slowly melting away. He asked his son to leave, that he didn't need this and could surely find another way to avoid this fate. "If this kills you, I'll never forgive myself. Not even in death. Too many have died already. You don't need me anymore, Luke. You needed me before, but I wasn't there. Now you can save yourself even from me." With only a few seconds left, Luke left the containment chamber and got far enough away from the epicenter. Wussy shouted at Patrick, "Why let him go? He's why we did all this." And Patrick's answer was simple: for love. There was nothing left to do to bring Luke back, and there was no way to stop the countdown either. But Dr. Vera believed that not everything was lost. This could still save Plastic Man's life. In the end, even though things didn't turn out as he had planned at first, he managed to repair that father-son bond he thought was lost. Shall we have a drink? To the old guys, to the old times. Old guys. Patrick O'Brien died tonight in the explosion. Robin was the one who informed the League about what had happened. He tricked everyone by claiming he saved Luke before the explosion, and Dr. No-Face, Plastic Man's sole accomplice in this affair, remained at large. Luke corroborated his partner's report and had nothing more to say or do about this matter. Both Batman and Superman agreed that this loss was truly a shame and offered their condolences to the boy. He may have killed people, but he was still a funny guy. Tal, the League also offered Luke to take his father's place, to be the new Plastic Man of the team. They thought that this way they could do some kind of damage control after all of Patrick's actions became public. However, Luke didn't accept. He was a criminal, a hero, and a mess. And he was my father. That's his mantle. It's my legacy. Thank you. But can you keep your Justice League? Batman believed the kid was making a mistake. After this, Robin got up from the table saying, "I don't blame him." Then he left the place. Luke continued visiting Dr. Vera to get some tests done and to frequently monitor any symptoms of decay. After everything they'd been through recently, it was hard for both to return to normal, but they had no choice but to move on. At night, Luke entered a jewelry store with the intention of stealing something valuable. Later, he unexpectedly arrived at his mother's house and asked if she had heard about what happened with Patrick. She just closed her eyes in sadness, just closed them. There was no need to talk about it. She simply handed him a gift that Patrick had left for him. It was that watch that she had liked so much a long time ago. There's still an important detail you need to know before we finish this story. Remember Patrick's hand that crawled off and vanished down the drain? Well, that limb didn't actually melt as such, but rather remained as a strange mass. And for some reason, it started to adapt to living on the surface, on the streets. It looked for shelter, protected itself from the rain. Even as if it were a living being, it started to hunt small animals, like rats, just to survive. It seemed that over time, the consciousness of this creature began to evolve little by little. In fact, in the last panels of the comic, when Luke's mother receives the watch, they both hug each other. And she has the last line saying that Luke is the best thing she and Patrick could have done. Just because of this, she considered her ex-husband a true hero. Through the window, outside and under the rain, we can see that the surviving limb of Plastic Man had already taken on a person, a humanoid form quite similar to the original hero. So it's more than likely that this isn't the definitive end for that Patrick. A man who died in the despair of not being heard. Please consider subscribing to this channel if you like this video, and also let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this. Don't forget to leave your opinion below this video and turn on notifications to stay updated on new videos. There's nothing more to say except thank you for stopping by. See you soon. My name is Alex for the NEGAYO channel. See you later.